For nearly 60 years, the Toronto Maple Leafs have chased a Stanley Cup. In that time, they've become one of the most valuable franchises in hockey, one of the most recognizable brands in Canada, and one of the most talked about teams in sports. But here's the question. How does a franchise become more powerful while winning less? That's the mystery at the heart of the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is their story. This is Inside the Franchise. Before we get started, if you enjoy deep dives into the history of sports franchises, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Here at Inside the Franchise, we upload a brand new franchise story every single day, exploring the ownership groups, dynasties, rivalries, and defining moments that shape the sports world. And while you're watching, let me know in the comments, will the Maple Leafs finally win another Stanley Cup before the end of this decade? Few teams in professional sports carry the weight of expectation that the Toronto Maple Leafs do. For more than a century, they have been one of hockey's defining organizations. Their history includes championships, iconic arenas, controversial ownership, corporate transformation, and one of the most passionate fan bases in sports. To understand why the Maple Leafs still matters so much today, we have to go back to the beginning. The franchise's story begins in 1917 with the formation of the National Hockey League. Toronto was one of the league's original markets, fielding a team known as the Toronto Arenas. Success came almost immediately. Just 1 year after joining the NHL, the Arenas won the Stanley Cup in 1918. Ownership changes soon followed, and in 1919, the club became the Toronto St. Patricks. The St. Pats captured another Stanley Cup in 1922, but financial difficulties eventually threatened the franchise's future. That changed in 1927 when Conn Smythe purchased the club. A former player, coach, soldier, and businessman, Smythe envisioned something bigger than a hockey team. One of his first moves was changing the organization's name. Drawing inspiration from Canada's national symbol and his military service during World War I, Smythe renamed the club the Toronto Maple Leafs. The decision would define the franchise forever. Conn Smythe believed great organizations were built through leadership, culture, and winning. Under his guidance, the Maple Leafs quickly became one of the NHL's premier franchises. Toronto won Stanley Cups in 1932, 1942, 1945, 1947, 1948, 1949, and 1951. The blue and white sweater became one of hockey's most recognizable uniforms. The franchise grew alongside the sport itself. For millions of Canadians, the Maple Leafs weren't simply another team. They were hockey's biggest stage. Players dreamed of wearing the uniform. Fans across the country followed every game. The foundation of hockey royalty had been established. In 1931, Smythe made perhaps the most important investment in franchise history. He built Maple Leaf Gardens. Constructed during the Great Depression, the arena quickly became one of the most iconic buildings in Canadian sports. Championships were won there. Legends were created there. Historic moments unfolded beneath its roof. For generations of fans, Maple Leaf Gardens became synonymous with hockey itself. The building transformed the Maple Leafs from a successful franchise into a national institution. By the middle of the 20th century, Toronto had become one of the most influential organizations in the sport. By the 1960s, the Maple Leafs were already one of hockey's most successful franchises. Then came 1967. The Leafs defeated the Chicago Blackhawks in 6 games to capture the Stanley Cup. At the time, it felt like another chapter in a championship tradition. Instead, it became the last Stanley Cup the franchise would win for decades. The NHL was entering a new era. Expansion was arriving. New markets were joining the league. The business of hockey was changing rapidly. The Maple Leafs entered the summer of 1967 as champions. They would not enter another summer as champions for generations. What followed wasn't one bad season. It wasn't one failed rebuild. It was an organizational struggle that would shape the next half-century of franchise history. To understand that struggle, you have to understand Harold Ballard. Ballard became one of the most powerful and controversial figures in franchise history. Under his leadership, the Maple Leafs remained financially successful and immensely popular. But organizational stability often proved difficult to maintain. Front office conflicts became common. Management turnover became frequent. Long-term planning frequently gave way to short-term decisions. While other franchises modernized, Toronto often seemed trapped by internal dysfunction. Many historians point to this era as a major reason the franchise fell behind its competitors. Yet something remarkable happened. The fans never stopped caring. The Maple Leafs remained the biggest story in Canadian hockey. Even without championships, the franchise's influence continued to grow. Despite inconsistent results on the ice, the Maple Leafs became stronger than ever as a business. Television ratings remained enormous. Corporate sponsors eagerly partnered with the organization. Demand for tickets remained among the highest in hockey. The franchise evolved into one of the NHL's financial powerhouses. For many fans, supporting the Maple Leafs had become more than entertainment. It was tradition. It was family. It was part of everyday life. The organization had become larger than wins and losses. It had become a cultural institution. In 1998, another transformational moment arrived. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment was created, placing the franchise within one of North America's most powerful sports ownership groups. The move changed the business side of the organization forever. Operations became increasingly sophisticated. Revenue expanded dramatically. Corporate partnerships grew. The franchise entered a new era as both a hockey team and a global sports business. A year later, the Maple Leafs moved from historic Maple Leaf Gardens into the newly opened Air Canada Centre, now known as Scotiabank Arena. The organization was evolving once again. In 2014, the Maple Leafs committed to another long-term transformation. Brendan Shanahan arrived with a mandate to modernize hockey operations and build a sustainable contender. The franchise embraced analytics, player development, and a patient rebuilding strategy. A new core emerged: Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Morgan Rielly. For the first time in years, many fans felt the organization had a clear direction. Expectations quickly returned. So did pressure. The goal remained unchanged: bring the Stanley Cup back to Toronto. So why do the Maple Leafs continue to matter so much? Because this story has never been only about championships. It's about identity. It's about history. It's about generations of families connected by a shared experience. The Maple Leafs are woven into the cultural fabric of Canada. Every victory feels bigger. Every defeat feels heavier. Every playoff run becomes a national conversation. Few organizations in sports command that level of attention. Even fewer maintain it for nearly 6 decades without a championship. The story of the Toronto Maple Leafs is one of hockey greatness, business innovation, cultural significance, and relentless expectation. Conn Smythe built a powerhouse. Maple Leaf Gardens helped create a national institution. Harold Ballard oversaw one of the most controversial eras in franchise history. MLSE transformed the organization into a sports business giant. And today, the modern Maple Leafs continue chasing the championship that has eluded them since 1967. Their story remains unfinished. Their expectations remain enormous. And every season begins with the same question: could this finally be the year? If you enjoyed today's story, make sure to check out our episode on Boca Juniors. It's a story of passionate supporters, legendary players, historic rivalries, and a stadium atmosphere unlike anything else in sports. From the streets of Buenos Aires to the world-famous La Bombonera, it's another fascinating look at how a sports franchise can become something much bigger than a team. Check the Inside the Franchise page for a full list of episodes. The story of the Toronto Maple Leafs is still being written. Every season brings new hope. Every playoff run brings new pressure. And until another Stanley Cup banner is raised in Toronto, one question will continue to follow this franchise: could this finally be the year? Thank you for watching Inside the Franchise. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us tomorrow for another deep dive. Until next time, we'll see you inside the franchise.